It was a time when the whole world was facing a dark age, a time when Rome was going downhill, a time when China had split up into 100 different polities, a time when the rest of the world was being attacked by the Huns. Plagues and changing environment was becoming a catalyst to the fall of empires past their prime. It was in this time period that India was at its peak. It was in this time period that Chandragupta I, the first emperor of the Gupta dynasty, married someone into an empire, and what followed would be written into history forever. By this point, a dozen different empires had risen and fallen in the subcontinent, but this would change the fabric of Indian society forever. It was in this time that, combined with the Vataka Empire in the Deccan, Gupta Empire would bring a golden age to India. So, how did it begin? I swear this is one of the last times I say this, but I don't know. Sometime in between 240 and 280 AD, a man named Sri Gupta took some amount of power in the lower half of the Ganga Valley. He was probably a trader that rose to some prominence over time. Now, who was he a vassal to? We don't know. It certainly wasn't Kushan Empire, because by that point it had shrunk away from the lower half of the Ganga Valley. Look, the point is that Sri Gupta and his son Ghatotkach was in some amount of power by the time that Sri Gupta's grandson, who was Chandragupta I, took over the Magad throne, which is a kingdom in Bihar and was the kingdom that started out the Mauryan Empire. The record keeping begins with his marriage. He married Kumara Devi, the princess of Lachavi kingdom and possibly its sole heir, because Chandragupta inherited all the lands of Lachavi kingdom after his marriage. Lachavi was a kingdom in northern Bihar and southern Nepal, and it had been around since the time of post-Maurya age. It was after this marriage that Chandragupta I would be named as King of Kings. It was such a legendary event that they even minted gold coins depicting this couple on one side. They would give birth to Samudragupta, who would turn this humble kingdom into an empire. At some point in his reign, Chandragupta would take after his namesake, which is Chandragupta Maurya, and he would give up his throne to his son. When did all of this happen? We don't have the exact dates for any of this. Maybe he took the throne in 319 AD or 320 AD. Maybe he married then. Maybe both happened back to back. We don't know. And then he left his throne to his 10-year-old son in 330 AD. With that can't be right. That's probably because it isn't right. We don't know when the Gupta era began. Most people believe that it was 320 AD at the ascension of Chandragupta I, and some people believe that it began at his son's coronation. Because of that and many other such things, it muddles up the timeline quite a bit. Regardless, there are many historians that give different dates to the ascension of Samudragupta. Historians push the date of Samudragupta's ascension to 335 AD, which is the year Chandragupta is believed to have died. Another group pushes that date to 350 AD based on inscriptions from Sri Lanka. And that in between the time period of 335 to 350, the Gupta Empire was reigned by this king called Kacha, who could be Samudragupta's older brother or his pet name. And Samudragupta was a name that was given to him after conquering lands next to the sea or the Samudra. And before that point, he might have been known as Kacha. But for my sanity, I'll pick the year 335 when Samudragupta was around 17 and he was known as Kacha until his conquest of the sea began in 350 AD. Why can't Indian history be easier? By this point, we know for a fact that majority of our writing was written down on very perishable material, like leaves or tree barks. They were very easy to burn or decay. The only sources that have survived this test of time were either set on stone by kings or passed down through oral history. And both usually only talked about major victories. The most interesting inscription during the Samudragupta era is the Allahabad pillar. It's a pillar that stands at the point where Ganga and Yamuna meet. Here, there are inscriptions from Ashoka, Samudragupta, and Jahangir. An inscription was added to it once every millennia, each outlining something major about their reign. According to this pillar, Samudragupta had captured the surface of the earth. It is a 33 verse long poem written by Harisena in immaculate Sanskrit, singing praises of Samudragupta and capturing the geopolitical situation of the time. This and many other inscriptions tell us that this was the extent of his empire by the time he died. Another inscription at Iran, which is Western Madhya Pradesh, mentions him driving away the local Saka rulers or Western Kshatrap rulers and giving a Vishnu idol to the local temple. Wait, idols and temples, when did they become a thing? We haven't talked about them until now. That's what I will talk about in the next video. The Gupta Empire brought about a great cultural revolution, or at least came to power during a time when everything about culture was shifting and changing. And probably they were the ones to catalyze it. I might even make a video about each of these emperors separately at some point in the future, but for now, let's just move on. He was succeeded by his eldest son Raman Gupta, who reigned for at most 7 years and lost a major battle to Sakas, and in process lost his wife to them. He also lost some of the western territories in the empire to them as well. His brother Chandragupta too had to raise another army and attack the Sakas and save his wife and reconquered the land that was lost. Chandragupta too then killed his brother Raman Gupta and married his wife. As one does, Raman Gupta was such an embarrassment to his family that none of his successors take his name in any of their inscriptions, and the only source of him is in a play that survives in bits and pieces by this point. This made historians think that he was a fictional character until some coins with his name on it popped up. Even then, he still remains a figure of major debate. But honestly speaking, this is what royalty usually does. It gets rid of all the embarrassing people in its line from history altogether. Now on to the man, the myth, the legend, Vikramaditya Chandragupta. He conquered all of this land and the deep state wants to No. But no. Okay. Anyway, what he actually did was he completely defeated the Sakas or Western Kshatraps and gained parts of Gujarat and Sindh. He also conquered Bengal and he conquered the remaining parts of Punjab, taking his empire all the way to Afghanistan. His era was of prosperity and peace. While he was a proponent of Vaishnavism, which means being a Vishnu Bhakt, he also built Shiva temples as well as built many Buddhist monasteries. It was during his reign that Faxian, a Chinese scholar, visited India, and he describes his reign as very peaceful and prosperous. There was a low crime rate despite there being no corporal punishment. Criminals were only fined based on their severity of the crime. Every soldier and bodyguard received regular salary which was practically unheard of outside of the Roman Empire during this time. It seemed to be a great empire with a lot of prosperity to be seen all around. Now, the pushback to these observations is that he was a Buddhist who only hung out with other Buddhists, and Buddhists at the time were the cream of the crop layer of the richest people, and so obviously people like that would end up living lives like these. Regardless, it seems that Chandragupta II's reign was largely prosperous and he was beloved by his people. He was succeeded by Kumaragupta, who, despite many disturbances, managed to hold on to every piece of land in the empire. Moreover, he is believed to be the one to establish the Nalanda University, one of the greatest universities of its time. But by far, Chandragupta's most important child is actually, weirdly enough, his daughter, Prabhavati Gupta. You see, at the time of Chandragupta II's reign, there were three major empires ruling over India. They were the Guptas, the Kalabras, and the Vatakas. The Kalabras in the south and the Vatakas in the Deccan plateau. She married Rudrasena II of the Vataka dynasty, who died 5 years into his reign. Their sons were too young to take the throne just yet, so she had to step up as the regent. For the next 20 years, the Vataka Empire was reigned by a queen unopposed. A queen that was more loyal to her father than to her husband. In many of her inscriptions, she uses her father's gotra instead of her husband's gotra to introduce herself. And she made many grants and changes in the empire to benefit the Guptas. Indeed, the reason why the latter half of her father's reign and her brother's reign was so peaceful was because she has seized any and all violence and competition in between the Vataka Empire and the Gupta Empire. From the death of her husband to her death, the Vataka Empire was a vassal to Gupta Empire in all but name. When her regency period ended, her eldest son took the throne 20 years after her ascension. He had terrible health and he died 10 years into his ascension. And for those 10 years, she was the main monarch and not her son, until her youngest son took over, who was able to wrestle away power from her. Or rather, she gave up the power because of probably old age. But despite that, she controlled any and all religious matter in the empire, even after giving up her power in the more secular ways. And until her youngest son lived, the pro-Gupta policies continued. In fact, it was a 70-year-long peace in India, partly because Kumaragupta's wife was from Kalabra dynasty. So all three empires at the time in India were in some way or the other related to one another, and so they did not want to go to war with one another. And similarly, in the northwest India, there were the Huns that would attack anywhere else, but due to some treaty or the others, in these 70 years, they did not attack. But at some point, Kumaragupta's successor, Skandagupta, will attack the Huns, and that will stir the beehive, which will end up stinging all of India. It would cause the Huns to attack the rest of India, and it would cause the downfall of all the three major empires of the time. To explore that and more, see you next time.